So this is coffee number 4 from the Coffee Club, and this is a Panama Geisha. It's called DILGO, and you join me with Ivica from Coffea Circulor, based in Norway, but right now we're talking to you in Sweden. So hi Ivica.
Hi Tim.
So tell us about you and about Coffea Circulor.
Well, let's see. It might be difficult to summarize 10 to 15 years of something that you've done, but I can start off by saying not talk about me, because Coffea Circulor was born in the United Nations and in the place where we used to work in Norway. And it's through these projects that we were conducting that we did a few trips to Kenya, specifically Nairobi. Happens that the United Nations Environmental Program's headquarters is located in Nairobi. So, you know, during the weekends when you were free from duty, you took your free time and went to see some other things, and we ended up at a couple of coffee farms. And to cut the story short, there we learned more about the not the coffee as a product, but more about the trade, if you will. So that involves everything from pricing, how labor is conducted, and so on. And there was something sketchy about the whole idea, because you know that the producers back then, this might have been like 2004 or something, I don't remember. They were for each for their harvest, they were paid about $0.7 back then, but that's for cherries. Okay, so essentially you need to pick about 6.5 to 7 kilos of cherries which makes up 1 kilo of green beans that you roast, and then you have moisture evaporation and so on. So it does sound a bit strange, you know, that the actual producer receives literally just a fraction of what both you and I can buy a coffee, regardless if it's commodity grade or what people refer to as specialty, still today. So this is not about me. It's more of a concept, I would say global concept. We're a international or global team today that works together, mostly more remotely as well due to the situation, as we know. And that I believe has paved the way for how we conduct our daily business. Not just business per se, but you know, it is what we do. So throughout the years, we have solidified all these ideas, the concept, into the Sustainable Development Goals, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or back then they were called the Millennium Goals. Through these, you know, goals, we have also established something that we back then called transparency in trade and pricing, and also the quality, which means that we believe that, I mean, you're eligible as a consumer to know the origin of your what you put into your system, basically what you eat, what you drink, and so on and so on. For those who are interested, obviously not everyone might be interested, but you know, it's what we do, at least. We also know that this has somehow expanded in a way as well, and it's somewhere tends to become some means of standard, and we believe it's interesting that others have picked up the idea to conduct their business in such way.
Now, how did you get to sort of be at the forefront of this industry? And I'd just like to know how you've managed to grow your business.
When looking back, how things have evolved, I believe that the inception could be that you started working from the other end of the chain of events, if you will. So I believe that this might be just a theory, but I think that, you know, when you start to work backwards, you know, if you want to produce something and push out a product, you can start pretty far back in the end of what's happening. So, you know, if you want to produce coffee, and especially today, meaning roasting coffee and not producing coffee or growing coffee, it's rather simple. You know, you can even use a frying pan, if you will, and after have acquired any means of grains or beans, right? And then you get yourself a pretty looking label and on some means of packaging, and you have one or two customers, and all of a sudden you have a more or less a business going. And it looks like it could be trending in such a way, because I remember when we started out, we were just a handful of roasters in Norway. And some time ago, I remember pretty recently that in one of these national events, I believe it was one of these national competitions, they announced that there were about 68 or so roasters in Norway. That is, so that is a massive growth, if you will. So with that said, I believe that from our point of view, when you start working from the other end, if you will, and likely understand how things connect in the chain of events, then you can poke that specific sector, learn about it, see what's going on, and mold your ideas either towards what happens in each of these sectors or compartments. So I don't want to say that we have done all of it. There's still a lot so much work to be done. You know, although we have been, as mentioned, working on what we call transparency, we're still not there. But I believe we're very close to achieving what we believe is the fully fledged idea of open trade. That's something we introduced this year with our own Kenya project. We go even further by explaining the actual process that goes into growing and harvesting and processing coffee, producing the coffee, and also the costs of doing that. Because if you produce a coffee and just put a price out there for the customer, it doesn't mean that they would necessarily know how much it costs, but there's a big chance they will comment on the final price without knowing the work that goes into it.
What is it that drives you to be so transparent? And is that something that you think should be done more in the industry?
I see there are two questions here. So to start off with the first one, namely, what's the driving force? And well, I think it all boils down to some means of personality. You know, if I believe that if you want to do something or achieve something, you either do things thoroughly or you don't. And I think that's about it, to put it in short. You know, I haven't been thinking much about it, because if I would spend so much time thinking about what I or we as an idea or concept we're doing, we won't probably not have time to implement any of those, you know, feelings or ideas that really have to go into this. And with that said, I think I believe that time will show if that particularly renders something of importance. Because as we said, you know, all of these matters that we have been talking about, they might not be, you know, quote, important. Maybe not for everyone, but for some, okay. And I believe that those are the people that we would like to stretch out to and reach, those who understand. I believe you do to that fullest extent by providing those comments and feedback and so on that you have done already here, which is highly appreciated.
This coffee, how long have you worked with it? I'd like to know your relationship with this coffee and the people involved.
Well, I was contacted by the founding father, literally founding father of the Altieri family, Eugene Altieri, some years ago, and he kindly enough asked if I would like to or if we would like to take a look at what they were doing. And back then they were processing their coffees in the conventional ways, meaning classic washed approach, the natural drying methodology, and I believe also with the trend that is going on right now is that there is a certain need or some requests from both the customer side, also from the general public, essentially, but also from us, if we would look upon ourselves as only getting green coffee and roasting it, of course it would be interesting to take a look at something else or what could be achieved. So I believe that is their strive to do something else and do something potentially new. And I believe this is one of the results that has come out from that in this year that has been and passed. So by the time I was able to take a look at that this is a experimental, if you will, coffee or lot.
Let's brew it and talk a bit more about the coffee then.
For this, in short, if I may, we recommend a recipe that we developed back in about 2000, or a method, 2016 or 17. It went into one of the World Brewers Cup championship back then, and it literally came out of a really simple idea, if you will. We wanted to showcase what the producer is doing, what the roaster is doing, and also what the brewer is doing. So it's we started to call it a 1-1-1 relationship, right? So in its essence, we wanted to take that and also incorporate that in the very practical details and how you would approach this method. So as a matter of fact, the very roasting that to cut it short again, short, the very roasting that I applied was 1/3 of each segment in the roast turned into 1-1-1. So you would dedicate time to 1/3 in the roasting procedure, the drying, the development and so on. So I think it all boils down into this method, if you will. And before we start the very brew, if you will, I just want to highlight why it's done in such a way, and it will just take a couple of seconds. So if you can use any vessel if you like, and regular glasses or anything, so you would start off your brew in like the way you do, and meaning you will grind the coffee, you pre-wet the filter, put the coffee in, and start to pour, right? However, for each pour you do, just so you learn what is actually happening here, is that you would move the filter over to a new vessel, right? So for this particular method, if we are using 20 grams of coffee and 300 grams of water, you would do one pour of 100 grams. And when that is drained, you will move on to this second one and then the third. So this is just to understand what's happening in each pour, okay? So when doing this and when upon developing this method, if you will, the first pour brings out a large portion of the acidic components in the coffee, okay? And then when you move over to this one, you develop the sweetness in your brew. And then the very last one, you will find out that it's maybe less intense, but this component here harmonizes your, it averages out everything, okay? So that's the theoretical approach, but also a practical. And I would, shortly encourage everyone to try. Not that you have to, but it's a very simple approach to understand what each pour is doing to your final cup of coffee. And as a matter of fact, what you can do later is that, you can use whatever 10 grams of the extracted fluid into this one, 10 of this and 10 of this, mix it into a glass, sip it and see what it's doing. And then if you believe that, okay, I would like to bring more sweetness into it, okay, well, then you add a bit more into this one. So the general approach would be that you pour one portion equally from the total mass that you intend to do. So we recommend that you use 20 grams of coffee and 300 grams of water, which means a ratio of 15:1. And you would pour your water in a 10 to 15 second interval, and you would wait for it to fully drain, and then you would pour again. So I'm gonna put those aside because now when we're doing this, obviously we will do everything in one single filter, correct?
Oh,
was that, under a bit of, was that understandable?
It was, but are you not going to do 3 pours?
No, I'm going to do just one. So this was just to illustrate the theory behind that went into developing this method, if you will. So these 3 pours, you will still do one pot, if you will, but it's for understanding what is actually happening in each pour. Because I think that when I don't have any statistics on it, obviously, but when you see people pouring their coffee, and I'm not fully convinced that everyone understand what is going on here and the final result, right? You just keep on pouring the water, and then you, in a way, sort of in layman's terms, you hope for the best. Then you might experience a little bit by increasing the dosage of the very coffee, or decreasing and so on. But I think that understanding it on a basic level will help you a lot. Also with new coffees as well, because this is what we do not on a daily basis, but when we develop new roasting algorithms for coffees and so on, to ensure that they match perfectly well with what we want to bring out of each coffee.
So when you have a new coffee, you're doing it in 3 separate vessels and then tasting them, or you're still pouring it in one, but just using the method?
We do it in to understand how the acidity develops, and then how the sweetness develops, and then what happens in, say, the final pour as well. And then of course you do a final
Single.
Final test. Yeah.
Do you recommend to people to pour in 3 different vessels, or do you just recommend, you just said it to explain?
I just set it up to explain. So we're not going to do this now, and perhaps not with a a high-end coffee, because as a result the beans are precious, So you can even do it with any type of coffee you have at home. It's just a matter of understanding what is going on here.
Right.
And with that said, a small note on the water, we do recommend a low mineral content water. Total dissolved solids should be in range of about 10 to 50. It's a recommendation. Obviously, you don't have to obey to that specific recommendation, but a soft water is recommended. And if I may, particularly for this coffee, it brings that velvety sensation to the overall experience, and it's a different kind of structure that you can bring out. Grind size, obviously, it has to do with your equipment that you might have at work or at home. And I do happen to have one of the DILGO beans here as well. I also recommend that people study their coffee, like physically, the density, how solid it is. Does it turn into if it sort of like vaporizes when you grind it? Because then you will also understand if you need to do any adjustments in respect to what equipment you might have. And I know that, Tim, you mentioned that we will do an exception today because these are precious beans. So we will use 15 grams instead, which then scales down the amount of water with the 1 to 15 ratio to 225. Okay. So with that said, since we will be pouring a slightly less amount of water, those 100 portions of water in those 3 pours, we will bring down to 75, 75, 75.
Excellent.
And additionally, to not let the water drain that fast from the filter, we will have to adjust the grinder as well. Supposedly about 2 turns to make the grinds a bit finer. You should, if you don't have a particular grinder that is used here today, you should target a setting between 600 and 800 microns for the particle size, that is. I would say medium, but moving towards the finer setting. So, and again, as a practical approach, it's like use a binary method of doing things. Scale things down proportionally. Go and think about it as halving it down. Bring it up to your 50% setting from 0 to 100. Bring it down to 50. Then turn it down to 25. Really see what happens. Then bring it up to 37.5, and fine tune it in best possible way there. It's like a good piece of stereo or hi-fi music equipment. You do need to set it in to fine-tune some of these settings. It's not just scrolling on a phone like you possibly do today.
Okay, I'm ready to brew.
For this particular filter, it's a Hario original Hario VCF. Japan made. Thank you, Japan. And pay particular notion to the filters as well. We recommend a temperature setting of 93 to 95. So you have a couple of degrees to be able to experiment with.
Often when I see the flavor notes on the bag, I don't necessarily agree. I don't always agree with what the roaster profiles, and I also think it's only the beginning of the story. You've put 2 flavor notes down, and I'm getting much more. And I feel like with your sort of aroma, flavor, aftertaste, acidity. You've put so many details about the sensory experience, much more than any other company I can think of. And that guidance is not only accurate, it's a wonderful sort of, I feel like you've sort of hand-holding me through the coffee tasting.
The intention with the label was particular that as well. And if you want me to say a few words on how that was developed as well, I think that also in a way summarizes the approach as well, you know, because, you know, although I myself will be able to find flavor or aroma X, you know, someone else in our team might be able to find aroma Y, if you will. But, you know, the overall composition of flavors and so on, that's what goes in there. A few pointers before we begin. Not to overcomplicate things, but that's also one part of the synchronization or the pouring method as well. Obviously, you will start your timer when the water hits the coffee. You will start from the center and then move out slowly in a circular, or, you know, considering in three dimensions, it's a helix pattern, okay? And by the time you might reach the wall or the peripheral area, do one revolution on the wall as well to ensure that all the coffee gets integrated again. So by the time you're ready with the brew, you don't want to have any coffee sticking to the wall, okay? That's very important because you can get, you know, side effects of this as well. So that's one detail. I'm pouring about, well, I'm not counting, you know, but if you want to synchronize everything, you will probably do about 10 revolutions. And by the time you reach the fifth, you will do the wall, if you will. Then you would move back to the center and re-engage. And then on the very final one, you would, you know, pour towards the wall in a very controlled way. So first pour is 100 grams of water, and then which happens over the course of, say, 10 to 15 seconds. So then you can also calibrate how fast you would need to pour.
I'm pouring in. And do you like to flatten the bed? Put your finger in?
Sure. Go ahead and do so.
Okay.
And whenever you're ready.
Ready.
I'm gonna stand up casually.
Okay. And it's one pour. I mean, yes, once I start the clock, so I get it right, 10 to 15 seconds to 100, spiral out, spiral back in.
Correct.
Great.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Starting the time.
And remember, 75 since we're doing 15 grams, not 100.
Ah, okay. Just in time.
You might want to cut those seconds as well during pouring as well, since you're doing a less amount of coffee. But it's fine. Yeah.
And do you have an idea on total brew time, or?
Total brew time we recommend for the 100 pouring. It's about 3 minutes sharp.
Excellent.
Yeah, 3 minutes. So now we're about like around 45 seconds. We do the second one since we are since we use less coffee.
Right.
This would be the second one, and off the walls. There you go. Okay. Just like.
To 150.
So 75 and 75, that equals to 150. Yep. There you go.
So is it at 1 minute 30 I go again?
Yes. There you go. Mine stopped sharp on 130. Dripping, that is.
Do I need to let it drain out completely if it hasn't yet?
Well, that's the marker for your setting on the actual grinder, right?
Well, I guess I ground slightly different, and therefore my TBT is going to be a little bit longer.
Yeah, so one can imagine that although these grinders are highly efficient and performance grinders, they might be off somewhere with a, call it, click or two, and that we should be done in about 220 something.
Yeah, I'm on 225 in my third pour.
220. Yep.
I think it will definitely be important on this final pour to capture the coffee from the edges.
Yes.
Pour it's slowing down a bit more, and a bit more is sticking to the sides.
Yes, yes. That's why we're actually doing that twice in each pour. And obviously, if you're scaling down the method, meaning going from 100, 100, 100 down to 75, 75, 75, you might want to do some small adjustments, of course. And but you know, it's a matter of training, obviously. The more you do this, the more you get the hang of it.
Right, I'm done.
So before we pour the coffee into a glass or so, I would suggest to let it rest for about 1 minute before serving. And in the meantime, you can obviously assess the aroma. You can do that by doing it directly as is, and then you can pick up the carafe and swirl it a few times to aerate or infuse it with a bit of air and see what actually happens with the aroma.
Okay.
And a deep breath, that is.
It's incredible smell, and it just straight away you can feel all the complexity and the magicalness of a geisha coffee, but unlike any I've had before.
Well, I mean, for me, as a goal, if I can integrate the aroma in the flavor as well, I think that's a very good match, because then you can immediately sense that, okay, what becomes vapor, essentially, you can also have as a liquid. And that's, in my personal opinion, that's a perfect match, because you can literally, taste what you can smell if you try to, if you know what I mean. It's not that you would separate something and you have something else. The aroma is something, and then you have something is something else in the flavor and the other elements of the components that you can assess.
So now, could you talk to me about the process? It's a very exciting one. So
yeah,
natural, anaerobic, and cold fermentation.
To cut it short, it's a you start off obviously with by harvesting cherries, and then they have to be of a certain Brix level, the sugar content, about 28 on a spectrometer, and you have to ensure, of course, that they're intact. You don't want to have damaged beans, of course. Although it's geisha, you might have a few as well. So you do want to separate those out, because if you don't, they might introduce some means of bacterial activity to all other cherries when they start to mix up on a drying bed or wherever you put them for the pre-processing. Such as here, I refer to it as a pre-process, the cold fermentation, and it's in its essence, it means that you would store the cherries in a cold compartment. So imagine if you would walk into a restaurant with those huge refrigerators, would bring a bag of cherries and store the cherries there for a number of days, or referred to as hours. It could be anything ranging from 48, 72, 120, and so on. And I believe these ones were about 72 hours. And that enables the very grain in the cherry to absorb a lot of the nutrients and the also the juice, if you will, from the fruit. But most importantly is the fact that when doing this, you imagine what happens when you go to the store and you buy dairy. You have to place it in a refrigerator to ensure that the level of bacterial activity doesn't accelerate, right? And the same goes here as well. You slow down the bacterial process to such an extent that you enable the fermentation to move forth slower. And that also enables the grain to absorb more elements that the cherry has to provide during a longer period of time. When that is done, you bring out the cherries and you place them on conventional drying African drying beds for I don't remember here particularly, but imagine that you have to bring down the moisture level in the grain to about 11%, by that time you are essentially done. You peel the cherries and then you have your grain or the green coffee. So that is the general overview, and in each of these phases of the preparation, you can do tweaks. You can extend the time. You can have separate temperatures controlling the environment that you are in, and so on. So as you might have understood by now, the result we have now is pretty astonishing, with a potential first phase or first result that we have. This is actually a second, not a second harvest, but a second phase of this one, because the first batch that was brought to my attention, I named it Lynn. That's after Eugene's daughter, because we didn't have a clear name of what to call it. So I just went along with the idea. I have a tendency to all the natural coffees that are I code name them in a feminine way, and then you have maybe the washed coffees. They are given a male name. So at the same time, I was actually provided with a washed Typica, and I felt that it should be named Gene after Eugene. So DILGO here is the extension of the first phase. So now we're working on the third one by extending some of the mentioned parameters that was such as timing, temperature, and see what we can achieve through those small tweaks so far.
An amazing experience. I love the details. So I can't wait to see what other people pick up in this coffee. So thank you very much, Ichi.
Well, thanks to you, Tim, as well, and the Right Roast. And also, I would like to extend my gratitude to the Altieri family as well. Obviously, without them, we wouldn't be here doing this virtual event.